and welcome to another late night talk. My guest this evening is Oliver Langmead. Hello, good evening,
Hello.
good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world.
I
It's
think I'm
night
just up the
somewhere.
road from you, Stephen. It's not.
They don't know that. They don't know. Wherever you are in the world, it's late night, which means late night talk, late night drinking, vodka, you know. You can drink what you want, you can say what you want, and we will. So today we're talking to Oliver about his journey. Everyone's been on a journey these days. I hate that word. Anyway, let's go back to the beginning. When you were growing up, what kind of stuff are you reading, playing, computer games, comics, books? What was influencing you? What was kind of like feeding into your imagination as a kid?
I remember the first thing, and this is going to feed into years and years of reading books filled with anthropomorphism. Redwall, right, was the big one. I'm sure you get it a lot all the
Oh, people
time.
say that. Yeah, and I'm like, wow, okay, Redwall seems to be huge.
It was a big thing. Brian Jacks writing his books about anthropomorphic mice with knives and
Hmm.
anthropomorphic hares and badgers and against evil stoats, etc. Yeah, I remember the first thing I ever wrote was I must have been like 11 or 12 in this with this ancient laptop that was, you know how they used to be not black and white but green, and
Green.
yeah,
Yes.
I wrote like a paragraph in the start because we all start out with our fan fictions, don't we?
Mhm.
Writing a small paragraph in the style of Brian Jacks and printing it out and being so proud of this
With a
thing.
line printer, of course.
Obviously, what are they called? Dot matrix,
Yes.
and
And you
you
pull off the
tear it
paper at the
off.
edge. The
Yeah.
whole paper, you peel that off at the edge on either side. Perforate. Some people have no idea. Anyone under 30 has no idea what we're talking about. Go back into the time machine on YouTube and find it. It's fascinating. But anyway, carry on.
Dot matrix printers. I miss them. I do, because it makes you feel like you're in a newsroom, so it's tearing off the lace. Yeah.
Yes.
I had Brian Jackson, that feeding straight into Terry Pratchett's Carpet People, all the his young adult kind of stuff. And I remember distinctly as well reading his younger stuff, and then trying one of the Discworld books and being absolutely baffled by it, and having to. It took me another few years. I think I started again on Discworld about 14, 15 before I could get into that. Um, but it was that kind of stuff. Philip Pullman, obviously, again, that wasn't his major trilogy. That was his detective-y stuff on the side that I
All right.
remember.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I don't know if they're quite as spoken about as his big trilogy,
No.
but absolutely fantastic sort of light fantasy fare. And then the whatever they had in oh god, what was the bookshop we had? Because there was this lovely local library where you could go down and pick up this, that, whatever. And then we moved, and the only thing left was a W.H. Smith, which has the
Right.
weirdest book selection. Because it's not like a Waterstones where you go. I mean, I know I'm telling you this for
No, but this
US
is
viewers.
this is for you viewers. Yeah.
Yeah, for you anywhere else in the world. So if you want a book in the UK, you go to Waterstones,
Which is
because they
our Barnes and Noble. It's the big nationwide chain. That's it.
it's huge. You want anything interesting, you go to Waterstones. They're great. They are genuinely awesome in Waterstones.
Yeah.
If you're stuck for time and have no other option, you can always nip into WH Smith instead. And they've got them at airports. They're all over, but their book selection is deeply weird. It's like you'll go in and the science fiction fantasy section is exactly who you expect it to be instead of anyone interesting. Well, I mean, we can't not call Tolkien interesting, I guess, but
It's all the big
Tolkien.
names. It's the Stephen Kings, it's the Tolkiens, it's the George Martins. you'll see them on the shelf. That's it,
all of our favorite aging white men. Yeah, they're all in one place, so you can pick up their science fiction fantasy. And I just remember being stuck with that for for so long. It was reading things like the Hardy Boys, I remember, because they did a reprint with really jazzy titles. Animorphs. Do you remember Animorphs?
Animorphs. No, I don't remember that.
How do you not remember Animorphs? So there were these incredibly weird books about these kids who could transform into animals. Anthropomorphism. It's always coming.
It seems to come back again. Yeah.
Yeah, and the covers were always deeply disturbing because it would have seriously Google animals.
Okay, I will after
and it
this.
would have like the kids transforming into dolphins, but just like you get the middle bit between
Ew.
person and dolphin. So it's like in proper body horror movie cover. It's so weird. And
Do you
then
remember
point
Manimal
horror.
on TV?
Animal.
Yeah,
No.
that was it. So it was one of the 80s shows, right, where a guy could transform into various animals, but only certain animals, right? And you'd get the halfway transformation point, and you'd see his skin bubbling, and it was kind of gross body horror stuff. And then he'd turn into like an eagle, and then I think another one. He had like 3 things he could turn into. One was like a puma, I think. One was an eagle, and I can't remember what the third one was. But it was an 80s TV show called Manimal. Yeah, it's brilliant. It sounds like a bit like that.
It's exactly that. Yeah, I'm just googling it now and I'm enjoying
Fascinating, isn't it?
these weird faces that are sort of uncanny in between.
And the makeup they had in the 80s obviously wasn't great, but it still disturbed me back then. It like freaked me out. Certain things from my childhood still disturb me to this day, like that, and the theme tune for Chucky freaks the shit out of me now. I can't listen to it now without wanting to hide under the bed. It's just so disturbing. It's like the show itself isn't that creepy, but the theme tune just gets under my skin. And the books are quite nice. They're the guy who wrote the Triffids, John Wyndham, it's him. But yeah, creepy. Anyway,
I'd say I also remember distinctly the first time I was terrified by TV. Now you've brought that up.
yes.
It was the Moomins. You
Oh,
remember
yeah,
that
they've got
guy?
kind of hippo things.
Yeah. There was a guy. There was an episode or multiple episodes where there was a guy. I can't remember his name. He had a weird name. Who would show up at their doorstep at night and just sort of stand there and then leave, and then just find his footprints in the morning. I was absolutely terrified by this guy. I couldn't even. One day I'm going to have to rediscover what that was about. But like the stuff they show, the stuff you could see they'd show to kids.
You'd never get away with it these days.
No, you definitely not get away with Manimal. I'm just looking at his transformation.
Yeah, they're creepy. They're proper creepy.
He looks like Chewbacca in the middle one.
Yeah. It was all those classic kind of, A-Team and Fall Guy, and we had Manimal. Yeah.
Absolutely killing me. Please look up Animorphs, though. I genuinely can't believe you've missed Animorphs. That was a phenomenon. They've made a TV show out of it, which was its own sort of weirdness.
So when did your love of, apart from when you were 11 writing a story, when did you actually think, you know what, I want to do this like properly, actually want to write novels, actually want to have a go at doing it myself?
Oh God, I think it's in the blood. I was writing since I was about probably, I have a certificate somewhere for writing a short story in class when I was about 6 years old. Genuinely.
Nice certificate.
Yeah, and I remember that story because it was about, I was walking home and there were all manner of perils along the way, like crocodile pits and quicksand. You know how we were all terrified of quicksand as children.
Yep.
And then it never really stopped. I mean, 11, 12, I was writing Red Wall fan fiction. And then obviously, as we do, you move on to vampire fan fiction.
Yes, Anne Rice, big influence.
Absolutely. Because we discover Anne Rice. And then, it just carried on into start. I wrote my first novel and it was, terrible, finished novel, I should say, terrible at about 17. And you know, as you do, you finish your first novel and you're like, that's it, I'm a world famous author now. I just need to send it off to someone and they'll recognize my genius.
I did that.
Yeah, it's the experience that you have. And then you send it off and you get taught a very valuable lesson about the difference between
very quickly. Yes.
the writing a book and writing a publishable book are very different things. But yeah, it was, I mean, when I was learning how to write as a teenager properly, it was a lot of internet forums and firing off little short stories at people, most often fanfic of, you know, vampire fiction. Warhammer was a big one, funnily enough, Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
Before moving on to actually trying to write my own stuff. And then, yeah, I just carried on through uni because I was dumb. I went to university and studied law because, as we all do, you get to the university age of wanting to make money and be an adult, and then you do that, and then you get over it and realize actually maybe I should do what makes me happy. Which is fantasy, right, science fiction. So all the way through my law degree, I wrote 3 other books, which was none of which were publishable by any standard, but we're slowly getting towards that point where they would be. Yeah. Long road, but yeah, it's in the blood. I've never stopped. I don't know, couldn't even tell you when I started, but always been there.
So when did you get a literary agent then? When did you send something out or you got a response other than no thanks, a standard rejection, dear insert name on a postcard I used to get in the old days on paper rejections?
I miss paper rejections. It's way more fun getting a massive fat envelope through the door and having this standard letter as they fire your own words back at you.
But as soon as you see that stamped addressed envelope with your own handwriting on, you don't even need to open it. You're like, I know what this is. I wrote this 4 months ago, and it's my own pages back. I don't need to see what the card says. I already know because you've sent it back to me. It's not a yes, clearly. So
it's great that they made you pay for your own postage back,
yes,
isn't it, as well? It's incredible.
Yes.
But sorry, what was the question?
When did you get some feedback, positive feedback from like a literary agent?
No, that was for an early draft of what would become Birds of Paradise, my 3rd book. I began getting a couple of agents saying, the book's terrible, but we like the idea, which is not in those exact words, but it's the standard form, but they put an extra sentence in being like, oh, this idea is pretty neat. And that crumb of appreciation is sort of what keeps you going.
Some approval,
right?
Yeah.
And I went through that thing again at the same time that I'm sure we all do, where you nearly get scammed because you're looking for agents online, and you find one of these crap ones that's like, we represent these people, being really vague, and then you apply, and then within 10 minutes they've sent an auto response by like, yes, we'll represent you, and you get excited for a minute, but it's just a scammer. So that nearly happened once. It's dreadful. And then the road to getting an agent, as it is for everyone, is a bit weird, I'm sure. I did a thing you should never do.
Okay.
Which is, these pitching events where you can pay extra money to have your work put in front of an agent and you get a little conversation with them.
Yeah.
The advice is never ever pay to get your work in front of anyone, really. But I did that like a chump, and it paid off. I put a bit of the 3rd full draft of what would eventually become Birds of Paradise in front of a chap from AM Heath, Ollie Munson.
Yeah,
really, really lovely guy. And he looked at it and he was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty neat. Can you send me the full manuscript, please?" And then as you do, you get really excited, you get hyped because you've got a request for a full manuscript, and you're immediately like, "That's it, career done. I'm going to be a megastar.
Buy that speedboat.
I'm going to be the next J.K. Rowling.
I'm completely
You know,
landlocked, but I'm buying a speedboat.
yeah, exactly. I'm going to have a yacht by the end of.
That's it. Oh, I'll find a lake somewhere and put it in there. That'll do.
Yeah, easy. And then it took him 6 months to read the fucking thing. The
Oh,
whole time you're going out of your mind, because that's how it is with anything in publishing. When you have anything out on submission with anyone, it is horrible.
yep.
So 6 months, grueling 6 months, and then he recommends me to one of his colleagues instead. He doesn't even want to sign my work. By which point, I had a different book, Dark Star, which was my debut, who had offers from two different editors. So I could go to this other agent and be like, "Hi, will you look at this? Also, I have two offers. Can you sort that out for me, please? Because I have no idea which one's best." And he did, and that's how I signed with him, by getting the offers from editors first. And even then, like, the manuscript that I was originally pitching to them, it wasn't ready by a long shot. It was the same good idea. The writing is on its way somewhere. Right. And then it would take me another, let's see, I got my agent in 2014, and Birds of Paradise came out in 2021. So it would take another 7 years for me to get it right.
Wow.
That book. Yeah.
Is that just working with them, doing revisions and updating it around, life and job and everything else?
It was a thing that we got to do sometimes, which is put the whole thing aside, start again from scratch. Because no, I did that 4 times with Birds of Paradise to get it right.
Oh God, that hurts me. Like, physically hurts me.
Yeah, it was worth it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not something I'd do again to that degree. It was just like, you have one of those books that sits in your brain and won't leave, and you have to finish it and get it out on the page. Yeah, it's like that. But either way, yeah. And then with my first agent, that was Robert Dinsdale, who no longer works as an agent. When he retired, I got inherited like an old haunted house by Alex Cochran, who is my current agent. And it was absolutely stellar. So yeah, it's a weird one. I feel like everyone's story for getting representation and their way through to. I mean, you must have this talking to everyone. Everyone's story is actually interesting.
Yeah.
It's always unique.
This is it. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, what's the silver bullet for X, or how to get published?" I'm like, there is the number of stories I've heard that are so different. I'm trying to, if the anything across to people, it's that there is no one path. There is no kind of route to success. It's just you try, and anything can happen in weird things. Like you. So I, in the early days, this is 2011, 2012, they had one of the first writers festivals at York University in the kind of the summer break. Like you, I paid to go to that, and you paid to have one-on-one with two agents who would read your book and give feedback as part of the festival. So I did that, and I did meet some agents, and I did get positive feedback on that particular book, and I did get a full manuscript request. That's on a thriller, like a Dean Koontz thriller. I'd written, and I got like, a full manuscript request. And then the feedback from one agent, I can't remember who it was now, but I think it was some from AM Heath, one of the older agents then, and he said, "Yeah, it's good, but it's just too vanilla." I was like, "Oh, okay, thanks for that,
alert, James Patterson. Someone's managed to write something even more.
So I was like, "Oh, right, okay." So that book died a death on the. But yeah, you do these things, and you take a risk and take a gamble, and it was really expensive to go to that festival. And I talked to my partner and said, should I do it? And the pros and cons. And in the end, I did. I'm glad I went, because I met some interesting people. I got some good feedback, but it wasn't that isn't the one that got me the agent, that wasn't a success. But yeah, it's when people ask for money up front, like to read your manuscript, it's a scam. To look at anything, it's a scam. I keep telling people this: never pay for someone to read your submission. It's a scam.
Yeah, no, never do. Like, it's annoying though, because the experience really was positive out of it. But like, when you take a step back and see the whole thing, you shouldn't do that. But it's easy to understand why people do.
Yeah. After
Uh,
years of rejection, if someone's, gives you some positive feedback, you're like,
yeah,
oh, this is it. This is brilliant. Things are a lot easier now, I think, because you don't have to send out your own letters in the post and print it out, and it's all digital and email, and you can access agents directly now and sort of things where you couldn't in the past. So there are a lot more pros and cons, a lot more websites warning you of bad agencies and stuff. But we did it a lot more blindfolded, I think, in the past. We had none of that support. It was just throw it out and see what happens, sort of thing.
yeah. I have a lot of for the benefit of the podcast, I work as a lecturer in creative writing at Lancaster University. And this is relevant. So one of the things I see a lot of and have to warn people against is predatory publishers
Yes.
online,
Yep.
which is these air quotation mark hybrid publishers that will, they say they publish traditionally but also offer packages for self-publishing or whatever, but what they actually do is they offer everybody publishing for money, with saying, yes, this is good enough, but we need you to pay for editing. So they're predatory in that way. And the
Mhm.
amount of students I have falling for that bullshit
Really?
is outrageous. Yeah, it's part of, it's something we have to warn them against, is look out for these if you want to do self-publishing, there are routes to do that that are legit, that you can
Yep.
invest money in and you can do stuff with it. But either do that with trusted self-publishing sort of websites, etc., or go down the traditional. Don't go for this hybrid nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So we touched on, we'll come back to your books in a second, but um, as a creative writing lecturer at university, that must be rewarding, as you said, as opposed to law, which is, I'm sure some people find it fascinating and love it. Richard Swan, he did it for years, and my friend Jamie Sawyer, he's a barrister, loves it, but their hobbies are, very different. But being a creative writing lecturer must be very, very rewarding. I've done guest lecturers, and I get a lot of interesting feedback from students. So does teaching feed into your own imagination? Does the day job actually feed you? Because normally it has nothing to do with writing books.
It's extraordinary. I won't say it's off the back of like looking at student work and helping students realize their own work isn't really the bit that feeds my creativity. That it's rewarding in its own way.
Yep.
It's finding these incredible new voices and helping younger writers usually be the best version of themselves as a writer, helping them to through some of the pitfalls that we all fall into, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The real richness of it, the real inspiring part of having that job and it feeding into the writing is mostly the community. It's being a part of a community of colleagues, students included, who inspire you with just conversations about writing, challenge you with new ways of looking at writing. It's the constant overwhelming amount of reading you need to do to be able to keep up with everything. It's easy to fall behind with reading. It's challenging yourself to look not only at the fiction that's coming out, the fiction that your students are looking at, which right now is a lot of romantasy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
and the criticism on the side. So what authors think, how they're writing, it'll be exactly the same as what you're doing with this video series you've got, right? It's just these conversations that sort of it gives you license to take yourself seriously as an artist and working with other artists, and uh, that feeds into the work you do. Just license to take yourself seriously, I think. Anyway, that was an odd answer. Yeah, it's a constant sort of meeting amazing people, whether they be students, colleagues, guests, having conversations with them that raise you up, and also put some good pressure on you to keep you on your toes, to keep you learning as a writer, how to, because if I feel like if I ever stop learning or stop challenging myself as a writer, then it will lose its charm, you know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
odd answer. Yeah.
No, it's fair, but I think in some ways having a day job that isn't any way connected to
Yeah.
creative writing is a bonus because it doesn't use the same muscles and it doesn't tire me out in the same way.
Yeah.
So do you ever feel like, because it is the same kind of stuff, after day at work, you sit down to do some writing and you go, just too knackered, I can't be bothered.
I'll tell you what, right, my job is, I'm very lucky to be on a research contract. So what that means is my job is divided up into three parts.
Right.
My day job, I should say. So there is the teaching, which is 1/3 of what I do, which is teaching students, creative writing, lecturing, etc., etc. The second part is research, which is my writing. I'm given time and space to do writing, do all the things that come with it. So interviews like this, go out there into the world, all these launches, all the editing, and all the extra things we need to do as working writers. And then the third of it that absolutely chimes with what you're saying about doing something that isn't creative for a bit is admin, because there has to be a considerable amount of administration to keep a university going, and 1/3 of my job is doing that. And you're exactly right. It's exactly like you say. You go in, you doing spreadsheets and sending out emails and following up on stuff for 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the week. And then you come out of it and it's like a reset in your brain. You haven't been stressing about the creativity for a bit. And it's lovely. And then suddenly, like a flash, new scenes will come to you. It's such a relief. Yeah. It's the bit of the job that is a relief to stop doing when it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be done, but it does take up a lot of time. And sometimes when you prefer to be writing, and you're like,
yes,
yeah, it's more so these days, I think, than ever before. But whether you're traditionally published or self-published, there's a lot of business and admin that has to be taken care of. People in the old days who were traditionally published had to do very little other than write the books. These days, we're expected and required to do a lot more.
You're not wrong. It's something I'm finding, because with Calypso, my latest book has done the best out of all my books, like hands down. It's getting great coverage. It's given me a lot of events, but a lot of events, and I'm finding that it's sort of gobbling up all of my time right now in a way where it's like I wish I had a bit more time for writing. But I'm that isn't to bemoan it. It's a wonderful experience getting to go around, do stuff like this, have brilliant conversations everywhere. But also, like, so much of the job becomes that. Becomes the putting yourself out into the world, social media, etc. That it does make you yearn for a time where there was more focus on the writing itself as an author, where we could do a little bit less of it. So yeah, double-edged sword. It's nice, but it's also massively time consuming.
Yeah. It's social media has changed in a lot of ways. I talk to people about that all the time. They ask me, is it required? Do I need to have so many followers? And I'm like, no, but it will be a part of your daily life or author experience. It's just kind of part and parcel these days. But anyway, let's talk about some of your books. So I describe you as a speculative fiction writer. Is that fair? Because you're not traditional fantasy, you're not traditional sci-fi. You're kind of focused on very interesting ideas and that reflect things in modern society, you might say, in some ways. especially things like glitterati, which are, so let's start with Calypso, your most modern book. Tell people about it, because it's quite unusual in a lot of different ways, I think.
copyright here. It's great.
Yeah, look at that! Look at that cover.
It's
It's a
lovely.
beautiful cover.
It's beautiful.
It
It's
is
also a
amazing.
deeply weird shape. It's very square.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my fault because I wrote it in A4, much to my editors, my poor editors' chagrin. Yeah. So I write both in prose, so your commercial science fiction, fantasy novels. I wrote both. That's books like Birds of Paradise, Glitterati, which we could chat about.
Yeah.
But I also write in verse, so verse novels. I've written 2 so far. The ongoing joke is that I don't write very many poems, but when I do, they're really, really long.
Yeah, whole 2 novels long.
Yeah, so two. I've written like 2 poems in my life, but they're book length. So
saga,
yeah,
unfolding saga.
it's terrific, terrific fun. So I've written 2. The first one, Dark Star, was 2015, and this is the latest, Calypso.
Okay, so tell people about it.
Yeah, it's a verse novel about terraforming, transformation. It is a space opera, science fiction verse novel, and it has 4 principal characters, each with their own sort of verse form on the page in here, and some of them look absolutely fabulous. And there's images in there as well. Yeah, and yeah, it's basically, although wonderfully, reviewers haven't been picking up that it's quite a straightforward retelling of Paradise Lost, which is nice because that means I've successfully stolen the plot of Paradise Lost without anyone really noticing.
Yeah, okay.
Milton can't tell me off.
Secrets out. Okay.
Yeah, it's out there, which is really lovely. It means that I've done the thing that we dream of doing, which is taking a story that inspires us and making it completely our own and putting it out there as something very, very different. But yeah, no, the response has been really lovely. Calypso, I think, just for how unusual it is, nightmare to get published. I'll tell you that.
Really?
Absolute nightmare.
Because it was prose, or because just the content, or
just because it's a verse novel, right?
Yeah.
So verse novels traditionally, one thing that this was easy to get to editors. Editors love this. Editors eat this up. The problem is marketing departments, right? Our old enemy, which what marketing departments do is they go and look at book sales of similar books a lot of the time, right? This is why it's really difficult to get anything truly experimental or novel out there, which is a good pun. No, truly novel out there. That it is rare to do that because there are no examples out there of similar books doing well, and it's definitely true of verse novels, especially science fiction verse novels, of which there are not many.
No.
The latest example probably being Deep Wheel Orcadia, which was Harry Josephine Giles. It won the Clark either way. Yeah, so it did fabulously well. But even then, I can't see it selling a huge amount of copies. What we had to do with Calypso in the end was I had an editor, George at Titan, who is brilliant. And he was like, I can take it back, but we've got to do something like get some really big names to blurb this. So I pulled out all this. I opened my address book,
your Filofax,
genuinely, and contacted almost everyone I could think of who might have something nice to say about Calypso. And because part of what I did for the research for Calypso was I went and talked to astronauts for it. So some of these astronauts got emails in their inbox. Hi, would you take a look at Calypso, please, and tell me if you like it, so we can get blurbs so I can sell it. None of the astronauts replied, obviously, but I was lucky enough to get the response. Actually, in the end, was overwhelming. Like out of the 20 odd people I approached, we got 15 blurbs, which is crazy.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And most of all, though, Sarah Waters was kind enough to actually take a look and write nice things about it, which was extraordinary. And that's the only reason it really exists, is because of community, because of the science fiction fantasy authors who took a chance on a really deeply weird experimental book and then said nice things about it, enough nice things that it sort of tipped it over into the marketing department felt like they could actually do something with it, you know?
Yeah, you're right. It's that thing of some people who don't know that when you're traditionally publishing, you normally have to, in your covering letter, talk about comp titles, comparison titles,
Yeah.
something similar, but it has to be fairly recent. It can't be like, oh, my book's just like Lord of the Rings. I'm like, no, it has to be. I've heard now it has to be within like the last 2 years. It used to be like 5 years, which is so the reason they do it is they need to know your book is a bit like X and Y, and based upon that, the publisher can calculate roughly how they think it's going to sell, and based upon that, roughly what they could offer you as an advance, and then how quickly they'd earn their money back. And it's a gamble, and it's always a gamble. But given that the big publishers are still in business, more often than not, they get it right. Even with the losses that don't make it, the ones who do really well balance out that they're always in the black, not the red, the black. I don't know. Anyway, they're always profitable. So
Yeah.
it works. But if you write something that is so weird and is so different and is so out there, the chances are that you might get it published, but the advance will be very small, so that the risk for them is a lot less. Like you get one man and one woman entities that do their own thing, like Neil Gaiman, like Lavi Tidar.
Yeah.
Trying to compare some of his books to somebody else's is mental. Like I read A Man Lies Dreaming recently. There's nothing like that. Like nothing ever I can think of that's like that. It's the most bizarre and weird and fucked up book, but it's brilliant and fascinating and weird and disturbing. Comp titles for that, but most people, most of us kind of, page write, just ordinary grinders have to have something. So the fact that you got Calypso out there is fantastic, because the next person who now does a prose novel goes, aha, well, Calypso was published by Oliver. So therefore, now you've got that. Indie space, they don't worry about any of this. They don't have to think about this kind of stuff. They just go, they put it out. And if it finds an audience and it grows, traditional then goes, ooh, that one's doing well. I'll acquire it. Or they go, we could do something like that, which is, I think, one of the reasons Romantasy has gone massive now, because it was doing so well in the indie space and other places, and now it's just so huge.
It's amazing, really. Yeah. No, it's like I have to tell students what one book I teach quite a lot. Well, I teach a few more experimental novels. So House of Leaves is the big one, right? Everyone dreams of writing something like House of Leaves, which is hugely experimental and successful. Who knows how that happened? XX by Rian Hughes, but a really tremendous example of this in action is Jeff Vandermeer's Dead Astronauts,
Right.
which is one of the weirdest books you will ever read. Like it's amazingly bizarre, amazingly weird. And the only reason that book is published is because he wrote Annihilation first, which is a huge mega hit. And having a huge mega hit gives you a name enough that you can pretty much get anything through off the back of that. Same with like China Mieville, right? Whose later novels are way more experimental.
Yeah.
But that's off the back of The City in the City, the Bastlag trilogy, I'm looking forward to seeing what this collaboration with Keanu Reeves is.
Yeah. So, do you know much about it?
Not a clue, no.
So, Keanu Reeves has been writing this comic about this, co-writing this comic called Berserker, about this immortal warrior that looks a bit like Keanu Reeves, oddly, in the comic, and it's about this guy that keeps coming back. He's not quite John Wick, but sort of, but he's an immortal warrior. And then he wanted to go back and write previous stuff with it in a novel form. So he spoke to China, and they bashed around some ideas, and he wrote it, and China wrote it, I'm sure, and then Keanu gave feedback, and so it's coming out. So it's set within that same world. I think there's going to be a film coming the next couple of years.
No.
What is the odds of that? But the fact that China's writing it, I think I love Keanu. He's fantastic. He's a great actor, and he's done so well of this, and he's changed direction so many times to what he is now is amazing. But China writing one of these books, that is going to be deeply weird and interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I've no idea what he's gonna. The elements he's gonna introduce will make it that little bit of spice on the top, and you think, I never saw that coming. You know,
I'm definitely I'm definitely going to read it. Like there's no
I
planet.
think I need to. I think I need to
Yeah,
read it.
yeah.
The people who pick it up for the celebrity thing of, oh, it's Keanu, and then there's the people like us who are like, yeah, but it's China. What's he gonna do
What's he going to do with that?
with a big commercial idea from a Hollywood celebrity about an immortal warrior? What will he do with that? Yeah, that's tickled my fancy for sure.
Yeah.
Mm. So tell me and the people about Glitterati, because this one is an interesting book for many reasons. But
Yeah. So before Calypso was Glitterati, which is a novel, a science fiction dystopia about fashion. It's about a sort of billionaire class whose entire existences revolve around fashion and aesthetics and looking good. It was completely the opposite to most of my writing in that I just went and wrote. My best way I can describe it is my publicist at the time told me that it was one of the most stupid books she'd ever read. It was the compliment was it's a stupid book written by a smart person, which I like, and
oh, all
I wish they could have put that on the cover.
right.
But yeah, it's a deeply stupid book. I had a lot of fun writing, and it was born out of a sort of general getting exhausted with billionaires and the idea that and there's the stupid amount of power they have and the stupid things they do with that power, like buying presidencies, buying rockets shaped like penises to go into space, buying
Hi,
Twitter.
Jeff.
Yeah, it's so just the stupid things they're doing with their godlike amounts of power.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a book about how stupid they are.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun actually. Writing satire. I really want to go back to it at some point. But yeah, it's about a chap called Simone who gets into a terrible rivalry with a fellow fashionista and the gradual epic escalation of their aesthetic rivalry.
It's that thing of like, if you have so much money, eventually you'll have done all the ordinary things that people talk about. Oh, I'll buy a speedboat. I'll go to this island. I'll travel here. I'll travel there. And eventually you get to the point where they're thinking, oh, what else can I do with the money? Oh no, I'll build a penis rocket and launch people into space. Or I'll buy Twitter and walk in there going with a kitchen sink going, what did he say? Let that sink in. And I'm like they're so bored. They don't have anything to do. They don't really know what to do with this vast amounts of money that can change into power. And so they'll try anything at this point to feel something. And I think that feels a lot like Glitterati.
Yeah, it's the billionaires are weirdly pathetic. Like it's when you have that amount of power that you can do literally anything, right? Why on earth would you spend your days on a social media website rallying people against a minority, right? Why would you spend your life doing that? Not mentioning any names,
Mm-hmm.
but why would you spend your why would you spend such colossal amounts of money and power and time looking for approval from people when you can just be happy? It's so strange, and I guess that was the point in Glitterati, or a lot of it, or the idea behind writing it was that billionaires aren't really human in the ways that. Well, I'm really interested in non-humans, right? And the boundaries of human non-human, what makes somebody non-human. Does it matter if we're not human anymore? That's a really interesting question. Or is personhood more important than being human?
Right.
So billionaires, I don't think they're human anymore. I think that amount of power makes them into strange, lightning rods or avatars for capitalism or weird ideologies that they get thrown into. Anyway, yeah, Glitterati is a deeply silly book about people arguing about handbags and who came up with a new fashion, a new look, and the consequences thereof when a rivalry becomes so vicious that you know the uglies get involved, as they call them. The little people have to get involved.
Yeah, well, celebrity culture and stuff, and that's kind of like the extreme version of it. It's that thing of,
Yeah.
if people keep telling them something so many times, or you're surrounded by people that tell you something, eventually they just start believing it, that they are this other thing. There are some Hollywood celebrities that, even off the, away from the films, they seem so down to earth and so grounded and so ordinary, and they're at the highest levels. And some of them literally have like an entourage. And I remember Graham Norton, he wouldn't say who it was, but he said there was one celebrity that came on, and they wanted 9 dressing rooms. And he was like, well, okay, for the interview show. It was a bit extreme, but he was like, okay, fine. One of them was just to charge her mobile phone in.
An entire dressing room.
Yeah,
I love it.
and he said, we'll never have that person back again. He would never say who it was. But it's just that thing of, how do you get to that level of like, you're so detached from reality that you think that is normal behavior? Or they do this just no longer, you say it's like humanity level. Do they no longer care what other people think because they don't regard them in the same species as other people? That they've, without using a certain fake made up cult religion, you've elevated to beyond some kind of fantastical super being that is no longer human because you've paid money and gone up all the levels and donated a portion of your wealth to this particular organization that remain nameless. Is it a mental switch that at some point they go, well, I'm now other because I'm no longer worried about the same things that other people concern themselves with?
Yeah, I think you're right. I feel like a person's world is actually quite small, and all the influences you get on it when you get to that level of power and money, it definitely does something odd and weird to you. It turns you into something else. Anyway, yeah. Point being, Glitterati. I took all the worst parts of billionaires and made them even worse. Turned it up all the way up to 11. So yeah, the petty rivalries, the vanities, the absolute certainty in oneself at the expense of reality, and turn them all up and made them even worse to make a deeply silly book. That I quite like, actually. It's out of all my books, it's the most fun to perform. Do you have one like that? Do you have a book that's like the most fun to orate or read?
Yeah, The Coward, because it's a quest adventure fantasy novel on the surface, but underneath it's talking about celebrity culture and the nature of heroism and how we perceive heroes and put them on pedestals, and fake news and propaganda. It's all about those kind of things. Yeah, it's the most fun to kind of read because you see the lights come on with some people. They get the other thing that you're talking about beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that's the most fun to talk about and do readings of.
Yeah, it's nice to have a book like that, I think, because I try and Calypso is a really interesting one to perform, right? Because it's a verse novel. There's
Yeah.
bits in here that are there's a part of it where the only way to perform it, this bit in particular, is to have 2 people reading it
Oh, wow.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
Because it's a post-human character listening to 2 people talk or argue at the same time. So to perform it live, I myself and another person would perform it. But otherwise, it's quite a tricky one to perform, especially some of the characters in here, which is why it's quite nice having Glitterati, because it feels like when I'm performing it, we can just have a good time, and it's less focus on the precise syllabic sort of constraints of the verse
Yeah.
novel,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
more just let's have a silly time laughing at these silly extraordinarily rich people as they discover an ugly child has appeared in their garden, and they try and work out what to do with it. You know, I really enjoy having a book like that. Yeah, that's just fun.
Mm. So what are you working on now? Are you working on something new? And what can you
Oh
say
yeah, I
about it?
mean, aren't we all, right?
Yep.
It's yeah, there's the idea that authors can take a holiday, but that's not how it works. Because as soon as you finish one thing, your brain's already on the next thing,
Yeah.
and you're like, even if you're on holiday, oh my god, it's still there in your brain. What next? What to do? Yeah, I'm working on the glitterati side of things. I'm trying to put together first thoughts for the fashion police. Obviously, that's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tricky one, and I'm still finding my way into it. But a book with that title clearly needs to be written. It's too good. It's too good to leave behind.
Yeah.
I'm working on, so next year I have got a collaborative novel with Alia Whiteley coming out called City of All Seasons, which we both absolutely love, and I'm looking forward to that. But we're working on a second collaborative novel as well, which
Oh,
is
cool.
deeply strange. I don't want to say much about that
No,
yet,
that's fair
but
enough. Fair enough.
very different from both of us, and the collaborative experience is just absolutely fabulous, completely different. And then, more broadly speaking, I'm working on my focus right now for this summer is a book called Slow Kingdom, which is going to be a Sherlock Holmes pastiche about a village where the trees have learned how to write. It's deeply,
Okay.
deeply weird. Yeah, but lots of fun to write. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I'm glad teaching hasn't robbed the joy of writing from you, and it's still
Gosh,
feeding
no.
your process.
Exactly. It's no matter what, the writing itself. Like I tell this to my students a lot, which is publishing can be draining, hard work. A lot of the time, quite depressing. Even though there are good bits, obviously, you know, you get to hold a book in your hand, you get to have conversations like this. A lot of the time, it's a lot of it's not the good bit. The good bit is the writing itself. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's actually sitting down, writing things out, figuring out scenes, uh, putting together sentences that you love and paragraphs that you love. That's the heart and soul of it. And you know, it's that at the end of the day which sustains us as artists, and keeps us going.
Definitely, definitely. Right. I think that's a good place to pause. I will put links down below where everyone can find links to you on online and on social media, because we
Oh,
have to be on social media these days.
we do.
Oh, it's tiring, more work. But yes, that's that. So people go out and check out Glitterati and Birds of Paradise and Calypso. And are you coming to WorldCon this year in August?
Who isn't? We're all going to be there.
We're all gonna be there.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll see you in August.
yeah, yeah,
I
absolutely.
keep saying August. It's now next month, which is what's terrifying me.
Early next month as well.
Oh, yeah. So that's that. But yes, come and find us if you're there in Glasgow. Come and find us and get books signed, and you'll find us in the bar most
Yeah,
evenings.
yeah. Well, thank you for a terrific chat. I really enjoyed chatting today.
You're welcome.
It's been terrific fun. It's nice talking through all the bits and pieces that go into the whole writing and publishing thing.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We're going to say goodnight for now. Good
See
night.
you.